The fortress doors groaned open under Kyle's hands, and the smell hit him like a fist. Decay, metal, and something older than either. He stepped inside, pulse rifle raised, scanning the darkness ahead. 3 months. 3 months since the colony ship crashed on this godforsaken rock. 3 months since the rescue beacon went silent. 3 months of watching good people die from hunger, from the cold, from things that hunted in the night. Now Kyle was alone. The fortress sat on the eastern ridge like a broken tooth, visible from the crash site but impossibly far on foot. It had taken him 5 days to reach it. 5 days of hell through purple jungles and across fields of glass that sang when the wind blew, but he'd made it. The interior stretched before him in massive corridors carved from black stone. Symbols covered every surface, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. His headlamp beam cut through the gloom, catching edges of doorways, alcoves, chambers branching off in every direction. This place was huge, enormous, built for something far larger than humans. Kyle's stomach twisted. Food, shelter, those were the priorities. Everything else could wait. He moved deeper, boots echoing on smooth floors. The air grew colder, no dust anywhere, no debris, just pristine stone and those maddening symbols everywhere he looked. A sound froze him mid-step. Breathing, not his own. Kyle spun, rifle tracking. Nothing. The corridor behind him stretched empty. But the sound continued, rhythmic and deep, like massive lungs filling and emptying somewhere in the walls themselves. His finger tightened on the trigger, then light blazed from the walls. Kyle stumbled back as the symbols ignited, flooding the corridor with blue-white radiance. The breathing grew louder, faster, and the floor vibrated beneath his feet. A voice crashed through his skull. Not heard but felt, speaking in no language he knew yet somehow understood perfectly. Worthy. The walls beside him split open. No doors, no mechanisms. The stone simply peeled back like flesh, revealing a chamber beyond that glowed with the same impossible light. Kyle's instincts screamed at him to run, but he'd come too far, lost too much. He had nothing left but forward. He stepped through. The chamber was circular, 50 feet across, and dominated by a pillar of crystalline material in its center. Inside the pillar, suspended in perfect clarity, hung a suit of armor. It was human-sized. Kyle approached slowly, rifle forgotten at his side. The armor seemed to watch him, sleek and seamless, covered in the same symbols that marked the walls. But these symbols moved, flowing across the surface like living things. The voice came again. Claim. Kyle reached out. His fingers touched the crystal. The world exploded into light and sound and pain beyond description. Kyle's scream died in his throat as the crystal shattered outward in a million fragments that never hit the ground. They dissolved into light, into energy, into something that poured through his skin like liquid fire. The armor moved. It flowed from the pillar like mercury, crossing the space between them in an instant. Kyle tried to pull back, but his body wouldn't respond. The armor hit his chest and spread, covering him in seconds, wrapping around his torso, his arms, his legs. He felt every nerve ending ignite at once. Information flooded his mind. Not words, not images. Pure knowledge, hammering into his consciousness faster than thought. The armor wasn't just covering him. It was connecting, integrating, reading every cell in his body and rewriting itself to match. Kyle saw flashes of things that couldn't be real. Vast ships moving between stars, battles that turned entire planets to ash, a race of beings twice human height, wearing armor like his, standing against enemies that blotted out suns. The architects, that's what they called themselves, and they were dead. Every last one, gone for 10,000 years, but their weapons remained. The armor sealed around Kyle's head and his vision exploded into clarity. He could see everything. Not just light, but heat signatures, electromagnetic fields, molecular structures. The walls around him weren't solid anymore. He saw through them, into chambers beyond, into levels that descended miles below the surface, and he saw what else lived in the fortress. Kyle's enhanced vision locked onto movement 3 levels down. Shapes. Dozens of them. Massive. Chitinous. Moving through the lower corridors with predatory purpose. The things that had hunted his colony. They'd followed him here. The armor's voice spoke directly into his mind now. Calm and precise. Threat detected. Initiating combat protocols. Stand by for weapons activation. Kyle felt something shift in his right arm. The armor there reshaped itself, plates sliding apart and reforming into a configuration that hummed with building energy. His left arm did the same, but different. Sharper. Bladed. The knowledge in his head told him what they were. Plasma cannon. Molecular disruptor blade. Standard architect infantry loadout. Standard. This was their basic gear. The floor beneath him trembled. The creatures were climbing. Fast. Kyle's new senses tracked them perfectly. 63 individual targets, moving up through shafts and passages with terrifying speed. They'd be here in under 2 minutes. Every human instinct told him to run, to hide. These things had slaughtered 140 colonists. They'd torn through fortified positions and sealed bunkers like they were paper. But Kyle wasn't human anymore. Not entirely. The armor pulsed against his skin, and he felt its hunger. Not for food, for the purpose it was built to serve. 10,000 years dormant, and now finally, it had a pilot again. Kyle walked back into the main corridor. The blue light from the walls intensified, responding to his presence. He raised his right arm and watched energy coil around the cannon, bright enough to hurt, even through his enhanced vision. The first creature burst from a side passage 30 feet ahead. It was massive. 10 feet of armored carapace and razor limbs, moving on 6 legs with a speed nothing that size should possess. Its head was all mandibles and black eyes, and when it saw Kyle it screamed, a sound like tearing metal. Kyle didn't hesitate. The plasma cannon fired. The blast caught the creature's center mass and vaporized it, just erased it from existence in a flash of superheated energy that left the walls glowing red. 2 more came from behind. Kyle spun, faster than thought, and the blade on his left arm extended 3 feet of shimmering molecular disruption. He swung once. Both creatures fell in pieces that dissolved before they hit the ground. More poured in, from every direction, from passages and shafts and doorways he hadn't even seen. And Kyle met them all. He moved through the corridor like a storm, plasma fire and blade work flowing together in perfect synchronization. The armor anticipated every threat, fed him targeting data faster than he could process, turned his body into a weapon that never stopped moving. Creatures died. Dozens. The corridor filled with the smell of burning chitin and ozone. But more kept coming. The armor's voice spoke again. Warning. Enemy force exceeds anticipated threat level. Recommend tactical withdrawal to fortified position. Kyle blasted another creature apart and felt something shift in his chest. Not fear. Not anymore. He was finally strong enough to fight back. Negative, Kyle said aloud, his voice amplified by the armor into something deeper, harder. We hold here. The armor paused for exactly 1 second. Then it responded, acknowledged. Activating enhanced combat mode. Authorization required for full weapons release. Kyle cut down 3 more creatures in a single spinning strike. Authorized. The fortress shook as something ancient and terrible woke up inside his armor. The armor blazed white hot across Kyle's body, and suddenly he wasn't moving anymore. He was flowing, every motion perfect. Every strike calculated 3 moves ahead by systems that had waged wars across galaxies. A creature lunged from above. Kyle's plasma cannon tracked it automatically and fired mid-dodge, turning it to ash while his blade carved through 2 more coming from his blind side. He didn't think about it. Didn't need to. The armor handled tactics. Kyle just had to want them dead. And he did. The corridor filled with corpses that dissolved into organic sludge. The creatures kept coming, but slower now, more cautious. They'd learned he was dangerous. Too late. Kyle pushed forward, step by step, reclaiming ground. The armor's energy reserves showed full. No, not full. They were climbing. The fortress itself was feeding power into his suit, through the floor, through the air, through connections he couldn't see but felt in his bones. He reached a junction where 5 corridors met. Creatures poured from 4 of them simultaneously. Kyle planted his feet and raised both arms. "Wide dispersal pattern," he said. The armor responded instantly. Both cannons reconfigured, barrels splitting into multiple emitters. Kyle fired, and the plasma spread like a net, filling the entire junction with superheated death. Creatures caught in it didn't even have time to scream. Silence fell. Kyle stood in the center of the junction, breathing hard inside the helmet. His heart hammered, but not from fear. From the raw adrenaline rush of being untouchable, of being the hunter instead of the prey. The armor's sensors swept outward. No more immediate threats. The surviving creatures were retreating to the lower levels. "Threat assessment!" Kyle commanded. Data flooded his vision. 3-dimensional maps of the entire fortress complex. Red dots marked creature concentrations. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands in the deeper levels. But that wasn't what made Kyle's breath catch. The map showed something else. Far below, past the creature nests, past sections of the fortress that had been sealed for millennia. A chamber, massive, and inside it, energy signatures that made his current armor look like a flashlight compared to a star. The armory. "What is that?" Kyle asked. The armor's voice held something almost like reverence. "Primary weapons cache. Architect Battlefleet armament. Sealed by command override after the final war." Kyle stared at the pulsing icon on his map. "Can we access it?" "Negative. Requires command authorization codes. Current pilot rank insufficient." "How do I increase rank?" "Prove combat effectiveness. Eliminate threats. Secure territory." "The armor will assess and upgrade authorization accordingly." Kyle looked down the corridors where the creatures had fled. They'd killed everyone he'd known. Everyone he tried to save. And now they were between him and weapons that could level cities. The choice was simple. Then let's go earn an upgrade. Kyle descended. The fortress changed as he went deeper. The corridors grew wider, taller, clearly built for the architect's massive frames. The symbols on the walls became more complex, telling stories in a language Kyle's armor-enhanced mind could now partially read. War. Conquest. 1,000 worlds brought under architect control. Then something worse. An enemy that couldn't be conquered, couldn't be reasoned with, could barely be understood. The Devourers. That's what the architects had called them. Not the creatures Kyle was hunting. Something else. Something that had forced the greatest military civilization in galactic history to seal away their own weapons and die rather than let those weapons fall into wrong hands. Kyle's sensors pinged. Movement ahead. He rounded a corner into a chamber the size of an aircraft hangar. And stopped. The creatures had been busy. The chamber was a nest. Organic matter covered every surface, pulsing and wet. Eggs. Hundreds of them, each one large enough to hold something human-sized. And tending them, moving between the clutches with careful precision, were creatures different from the hunters. Workers. Drones. Whatever they were unarmed. They saw Kyle and froze. The armor's tactical display highlighted them. No threat assessment, no weapons detected. Just frightened alien workers protecting their young. Kyle's finger hovered over the cannon trigger. One shot. Wide dispersal. He could sterilize the entire chamber in seconds. Remove the threat before it hatched. Before more hunters were born. It would be smart. Tactical. His armor waited for the command, offering no opinion. Kyle lowered his arm. Mark this chamber, he said. We bypass it. Acknowledged. Note. This decision may increase future threat levels. Noted. We're not butchers. Kyle walked along the chamber's edge, keeping his weapons visible but not aimed. The workers tracked him with those black eyes but didn't attack, didn't even approach. They just watched as he passed and continued deeper. Beyond the nursery, the fortress became a war zone. Hunter creatures filled the corridors, but these were different, larger. Armored with metal plates scavenged from somewhere, wielding crude weapons that sparked with stolen energy. They'd adapted, learned to use technology. The first one charged with something like a spear, crackling with electricity. Kyle caught it on his blade and the weapon shattered. His return strike took the creature's head off. More came, organized now, flanking, using tactics. Kyle met them with tactics of his own. He used the narrow corridors to funnel them, limiting how many could attack at once. Used his sensors to track ambushes before they developed. Used the fortress itself, blasting support pillars to drop ceilings on clustered enemies. He fought for hours, through corridors and chambers, down ramps and spiral passages that descended into the fortress's heart. And with each victory, he felt the armor change, grow. Learn from him as much as he learned from it. New weapons unlocked, new capabilities. His plasma cannon gained variable yield settings. His blade extended to 10 feet when needed. His armor's density increased, shrugging off attacks that would have staggered him before. Finally, Kyle reached a massive door sealed with symbols that glowed red. Command Authorization Chamber, the armor announced. Beyond this point, rank assessment required. Kyle checked his tactical display. No creatures within sensor range. They'd stopped pursuing 3 levels up. They were afraid. Good. Open it, Kyle commanded. The symbols flared brilliant white and the door split down the middle, opening into darkness beyond. Kyle stepped through into a chamber that made the nursery look tiny, and floating in the center, suspended in fields of crackling energy, was a suit of armor that made his look like a child's toy. Commander class. Built for architect generals who led armies across star systems. The armor's voice spoke, and for the first time, Kyle heard emotion in it. Pride. Qualification trial begins now. The door slammed shut behind him, and something massive moved in the darkness. Light exploded across the chamber as defense systems came online. Kyle's sensors screamed warnings half a second before the first attack arrived. He threw himself sideways as a beam of coherent energy vaporized the space where he'd been standing. The stone floor turned to glass. Kyle rolled to his feet and finally saw what he was fighting. Combat drone. Architect design. 15 feet tall, floating on anti-gravity emitters, bristling with weapon systems that tracked him with mechanical precision. It fired again. 3 different weapons simultaneously. Kyle's armor reacted faster than thought, throwing up an energy shield he didn't know he had. The attack splashed against it in cascades of light and force that drove him backward across the floor. Warning, his armor announced calmly. Shield capacity at 60%. Recommend evasive action. Kyle didn't need the recommendation. He was already moving, sprinting toward cover behind a massive pillar. The drone's weapons chewed through stone like it was foam, forcing him to keep moving, keep dodging. His plasma cannon fired back, but the shots just deflected off the drone's shields. It didn't even slow down. Tactical analysis, Kyle shouted over the sound of explosions. Data flooded his vision. The drone was using a rotating shield frequency. Every 0.7 seconds, it shifted to a new configuration. His weapons couldn't penetrate because they were firing the same energy signature repeatedly. But if he could match the timing, hit it during the frequency transition when the shields were weakest, Kyle waited for the pattern to repeat, counted down in his head. 0.7 seconds. 0.7 seconds. 0.7. Now. He leaned out and fired. The plasma bolt punched through and hit the drone's central chassis. Armor plating cracked. The drone spun, recalibrating, and its weapons went dark for exactly 2 seconds. Kyle didn't waste them. He charged. Full sprint across open ground. The drone's weapons came back online, but Kyle was already inside its firing arc, too close for the main cannons to track. His molecular disruption blade extended to full length, and he drove it upward into the drone's undercarriage. The drone exploded. Kyle's shields absorbed most of the blast, but the shockwave still threw him 20 feet. He hit the ground hard, armor sparking, warning indicators flashing across his vision. Before he could stand, 2 more drones materialized from alcoves in the walls. "You've got to be kidding me," Kyle muttered. The armor's response was almost amused. Commander qualification requires demonstration of tactical superiority under adverse conditions. Both drones opened fire. Kyle rolled behind cover as the chamber turned into hell. Energy beams carved through everything, explosions threw debris in every direction. His shields dropped to 30%, then 20%. He needed a new strategy. Fast. Kyle's enhanced vision scanned the chamber. The commander armor still floated in the center, untouched by the chaos. The energy fields holding it were anchored to emitters in the floor, each one glowing with the same blue-white light as the fortress walls. An idea formed. Crazy. Probably suicidal, but the only option he had. Kyle sprinted from cover directly toward the suspended commander armor. Both drones tracked him instantly, firing everything they had. His shields collapsed completely and shots started hitting his actual armor, burning through layers, sending pain signals screaming through his nervous system. He didn't stop. Kyle reached the first emitter and swung his blade through it. The emitter exploded, and the energy field destabilized. The commander armor dropped 6 inches and tilted. The drones repositioned, trying to get clear shots without hitting their prize. Kyle used that hesitation. He destroyed the second emitter, then the third. The commander armor fell free and Kyle caught it. The weight nearly crushed him, but his armor compensated. Servos screaming as they redistributed the load. He spun, using the commander armor as a shield. The drones fired. Their shots hit the commander armor and just stopped, absorbed completely. The armor didn't even mark. Kyle felt it respond, not to him, to the attack, like a sleeping giant stirring at being disturbed. Energy erupted from the commander armor in a wave that hit both drones simultaneously. They simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris. Just gone, erased from reality by power beyond anything Kyle had seen. Then, the wave hit Kyle. His armor should have protected him, should have shielded him from the energy overflow. Instead, it opened completely, every defense dropping, every barrier dissolving. The commander armor flowed over him like living metal, merging with his existing suit, integrating, transforming. Kyle screamed as it rewrote everything. His armor, his connection to it, the very structure of the bond between pilot and machine. When it ended, Kyle stood in the center of the chamber wearing something that barely resembled what he'd started with. The armor was sleeker now, more advanced, covered in symbols that moved like breathing things. His weapons had transformed too. The plasma cannon was integrated into his entire arm, capable of outputs that would have overloaded his previous systems. The molecular blade had become something else entirely, a weapon that could cut through space itself if he pushed it hard enough. And his mind. Kyle could feel the fortress now. Not just see it through sensors, but feel it. Every corridor, every chamber, every system still functioning after 10,000 years. It was all connected to him, responding to him, recognizing him as what he'd become. Commander, authorization granted, the armor announced, but its voice was different now, deeper, more present. Full weapons cache access approved. Welcome, Commander Kyle. The massive door at the chamber's far end opened, revealing a descent into depths his sensors couldn't fully map. Kyle walked forward, each step feeling different, stronger. The armor didn't just move with him anymore, it anticipated him. Read his intentions and acted on them before he fully formed the thoughts. He descended past the creature nests, past the levels he'd fought through. They didn't attack. Couldn't attack. Something in the commander armor broadcast authority that even alien instincts recognized and feared. The armory doors waited at the bottom, 20 feet tall, sealed with symbols that had kept them closed since the architect's final days. Kyle placed his hand against the door and felt the lock recognize him, assess him, judge whether he was worthy of what lay beyond. The doors opened. The armory stretched before him like a cathedral built to war, racks upon racks of weapons, armor suits in configurations Kyle couldn't begin to understand, vehicles that hovered on fields of contained gravity, ammunition that glowed with barely restrained destruction, and at the far end, mounted on a platform like a throne, something that made everything else look like toys. A ship, not large, maybe 40 feet long. But the power signature coming from it made Kyle's armor reading spike into the red. It was a fighter, an architect void fighter, designed for ship-to-ship combat in the deep black between stars. Kyle approached it slowly, reverently. This was beyond anything humanity had achieved, beyond anything he'd imagined possible. His armor interfaced with the ship automatically. Data flowed. The ship's systems came online, running diagnostics, checking weapon loads, preparing for a pilot it hadn't had in 10 millennia. Everything was functional. Everything was ready. Kyle stood before it and felt something shift in his chest. Not the armor, him. The human part buried under all this alien technology. He'd come to this fortress to survive, to find shelter, and start over. Instead, he'd found the power to do more than survive. He could fight back, could take the battle to anything that threatened him, could become something humanity had never produced, a protector with the weapons to actually protect. Kyle climbed into the fighter's cockpit, and the systems wrapped around him like a second skin over his armor. Destination? The ship asked. Kyle smiled inside his helmet. Up. Let's see what else is out there. The ship's engines ignited with a sound like thunder contained in diamond. The fighter launched vertically through a shaft Kyle's sensors hadn't detected before. The fortress had hidden passages everywhere, designed for rapid deployment of forces that no longer existed. Till now. Kyle burst from the fortress into open air and kept climbing. The purple sky of this forgotten world turned darker as he punched through the atmosphere into the black beyond. Stars appeared, sharp and cold, and his sensors immediately began cataloging them. Then the alarms hit. Multiple contacts, dozens of them. Ships in orbit that his armor's ground-based systems had never detected. Not architect, not human, something else entirely. Kyle's tactical display painted them across his vision. Massive vessels, organic and technological fused together in designs that hurt to comprehend. They hung in orbital patterns around the planet like predators circling prey, the Devourers, not just a historical threat. Here, now. And they'd detected his launch. 3 smaller ships broke formation and dove toward him, each one larger than his fighter, bristling with weapons that charged with sickly green light. The fighter's AI spoke in his mind, calm despite the impossible odds. Enemy vessels identified. Devourer scout class. Recommend immediate evasive action. Kyle checked his weapons display. Plasma torpedoes, mass drivers, energy cannons that could crack asteroids. Everything fully loaded and hungry for targets. Negative, Kyle said. We engage. The fighter didn't question. It responded. Kyle's first shot caught the lead enemy ship center mass. The plasma torpedo hit with enough force to split it in half. The pieces tumbled away, leaking atmosphere and fluids that froze instantly in the void. The other 2 scattered, trying to flank him. Kyle inverted his fighter and fired the mass drivers. Solid projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds, tore through the second ship's hull like it was paper. It exploded in a flash that lit up the darkness. The third ship got smart. Ran. Kyle pursued. His fighter was faster. So much faster. He closed the distance in seconds and put an energy cannon burst through its engines. The ship went dead in space, drifting. Kyle could have finished it. Should have finished it. Instead, he listened to the Commander Armor's tactical assessment. One survivor would report back, would tell the Devourer fleet that something new had entered the field, something dangerous. Let them know. Let them be afraid for once. Kyle broke off pursuit and dove back toward the planet, but he didn't return to the fortress. His sensors had found something else during the fight, a signal. Faint, human origin, broadcasting from the far side of the planet. The colony ship's emergency beacon. Still active, still calling for help that would never come. Kyle set course for it. The crash site appeared on his display. The ship was a broken shell half buried in ice fields that stretched to the horizon. No life signs. Not anymore. Everyone was gone. Except the beacon kept transmitting. Automated. Endless. A monument to hope that had died 3 months ago. Kyle landed the fighter beside it and climbed out. His commander armor shielded him from the brutal cold as he walked through the wreckage, past sleeping quarters where people had dreamed of new beginnings, past the command deck where the captain had made his final log entry. Kyle found the beacon in the communications bay, a simple device, barely functional, but still screaming into the void for salvation. He reached out to shut it off, to let the dead rest, then stopped. The Devourers were here, in orbit, waiting for what Kyle didn't know, but nothing good. And if there were Devourers here, there would be more elsewhere, threatening other worlds, other colonies, other humans who had no idea what was coming. Kyle left the beacon active, but he changed its message. His commander armor interfaced with the system easily, rewriting the automated distress call into something new. A message that would broadcast not just to any passing ship, but across frequencies the architects had used to coordinate entire fleets. This is Commander Kyle of Fortress Epsilon. Architect systems active and operational. Devourer presence confirmed. Any human forces receiving this transmission, be advised, you are not alone. Help is available. Coordinates attached. He encoded the fortress location and set the message to repeat. If anyone came, he'd be ready. He had the fortress, the armory, the weapons to arm 1,000 soldiers if he needed to. And he had the knowledge, buried in his armor's databases, to teach them to use it all. If no one came, he'd go to them. The fighter could reach the nearest colony in weeks. He could warn them, arm them, show humanity how to fight back against threats they didn't even know existed. Kyle walked back to his fighter and paused at the hatch. He looked up at the stars where Devourer's ships still circled, waiting for whatever dark purpose drove them. 3 months ago, he'd been a colonist, a farmer, someone who just wanted to build a new life far from Earth's overcrowded cities. Now he was something else, something humanity needed, a protector with the weapons of gods. Kyle climbed into the fighter and felt the systems embrace him. The commander armor pulsed against his skin. Ready, always ready. Set course for the nearest Devourer ship, Kyle commanded. The fighter's AI hesitated for exactly 1 second. Clarification. You wish to engage the capital vessel? Current tactical assessment suggests. I know what it suggests, Kyle interrupted. Set the course. The engines ignited. Kyle didn't know if he could win against something that size. Didn't know if his weapons would be enough. Didn't know if the armor would protect him against weapons designed to crack planets. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was done running, done hiding, done watching threats destroy everything humans tried to build. The architects were gone. Their war was over, but their weapons remained, and Kyle would use every last one to make sure humanity survived what was coming. The fighter accelerated into the black, toward enemies that had never faced anything like him before. And somewhere in the fortress below, ancient systems stirred to life, responding to their commander's will, preparing for a war that was just beginning. Kyle smiled inside his helmet. Let them come. Let them all come. He was